let's say if I go and edit an element in HydroLearn, and then when I finish editing, they submit, right? And then once I press submit, that should be sufficient to save the information, right? I don't need to do anything else.
Yeah,
Is that
so
right?
editing inside of a component, and then as you exit it, you have to hit save, right?
Okay, right.
But I think outside of that, HydroLearn kind of, well, Course Outline does auto save. Other times you'll see the notification pop up at the bottom of your screen, but it's very obvious.
Right.
It's like black background, white text, orange buttons. Can't miss it. So
Right.
if you see that pop
Right.
up, you always have to hit save there too.
Okay. Okay, cheers.
It is 10:01, so I will go ahead and get us started here. Welcome back. Thanks for coming back. We know that Wednesday is the tough day, right? Monday and Tuesday are pretty intense, lots of sessions. Now we kind of shift our model, and I'm not promising less intensity, but I am promising more work time to actually work on developing your module now that we have kind of the building blocks established. So today, what we're going to focus on this morning is really talking about those assessments, and by assessments, I mean the learning activities and rubrics and how to create a rubric in HydroLearn. And then in the afternoon, we're going to meet in our content groups pretty much right away and get some feedback on that learning activity that you've been either the same one you were working on yesterday, or if you finished developing that one and you're working on a new one, then that could be it. So by the end of today's workshop, you will have built learning activities, hopefully more than one, but at least one, that align with your learning objectives. And you have built, hopefully you will have built those in HydroLearn. So I understand that everyone might take a different approach. You might want to build all your learning activities in Google before putting any of them in HydroLearn, or you might want to put them in as you go. We'll let you make that choice, but that's where you're moving towards, of course. And then we want you to have designed at least one rubric that aligns with your learning objectives and clearly assesses that learning activity that it's designed for. So those are our goals for today. I think that these are highly accomplishable, and based on how well you all have been working, I wouldn't be surprised if you accomplish even more.
Good morning, Melissa.
Morning, Dan.
Holy cow, you are serious. It's like 2 minutes past the hour. Okay, 4. And you're already on slide whatever. Sheesh.
Yes. So Dan, would you like to take over now?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
Morning, everybody. Isn't it nice to know that our fearless leader does not waste a moment of your time? It is go, go. We're already, actually I said slide 4, we're on slide 6. Let's move forward a little bit then. Okay, so we have some reminders for today. You all have put in, gosh, what are we in the midweek reminders for the hackathon. It's Wednesday already. It's garbage day here in Lehigh. It's a good day to sort of remember a couple of quick things, such as, first of all, we appreciate the work that you're putting in already. We know that it's a long workshop, it's a long hackathon, but we're excited with the results that you're going to produce. So kudos to you for all the good stuff you've done already. Do take breaks as needed, especially when we have these little work breaks, when we have these little, individual work sessions with you and your partner. I think Melissa's mentioned a couple of times, hey, we're going to go to a 1 hour or a 2 hour work session. If you need to do your bio breaks or get some food or whatever, go ahead and just organize that with your partner. But do come back. We need you to come back and continue to participate. We know it's long, but come back. Honestly, I would like to see you turn on your video and say hi again, so we know you're there as a real human being. And then, if you need to turn it off, fine. But just turn on long enough to wave and say, hey, we're back. We're excited to be here. We know that emergencies happen. Grandbabies are born and different things come up. But if you would just shoot your partner an email, and also please contact one of the co-PIs to let us know, hey, something's come up, you're not going to be able to come back, or you're going to be late, or whatever the case may be. Please just do that. Since I believe almost all of you are working with a partner, it's I know you're probably talking to your partner, but also let us know if something's come up and you're going to have to miss part of the workshop. Obviously, there is a financial, a fellowship or a stipend or something that's associated with this. And we're not holding that over your head and dangling it saying, gosh, you got to finish this, you got to be here and everything else, you don't get your fellowship, because we know you're all professionals. But at the same time, we want to make sure that you feel, and that we're able to get something, you're able to complete the thing and receive that and have it be all in the up and up. So those are just the midweek reminders. And so, yeah, well, here's your check-in for today. I'll do this one. Let's see, you can only watch one movie or TV show for the rest of your life. Now, it can be a series, that's okay. So what is that movie or show? Express your answer by sharing a photo or GIF on this slide. How are they going to do that? Can everyone edit this slide? Oh, it says, add your photo or GIF to this slide deck on slide 8. It's in the chat. So click there and go to slide 8 and add either a photograph or a screen capture or a GIF or something that tells us what's the one movie or show you get to watch for the rest of your life.
When you click that link, you'll have to click open with Google Slides then to get there.
Slide 8. Ooh, wow, now you've got access to the slides for today. You can, okay, be good citizens and don't go changing other stuff in there. I have to tell my students that too when we do shared slides, but slide 8, okay, there it is. Top Gun, seriously, okay. It's a good one. I don't know, what's this one? Oh, it's the Philadelphia one. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Is that what that yellow one is?
Yeah, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Nacho. Hopefully some of you got that reference. Boston Legal's a good one. Problem with, I put Nacho Libre in there, but it's only a 2-hour movie. So like those of you with like Boston Legal, you're gonna have a lot more entertainment because you got multiple seasons. Frasier's a good one. Seinfeld, classic. All right. What's this you just folded in? Who's that? What shows that?
That's Schitt's Creek.
Oh, okay. I know some people that are diehard Schitt's Creek fans. Yes, I get it.
Alyssa, that's probably one of the best moments from Schitt's Creek too.
Oh, fun. That's cool. The Office. Good. I could put Parks and Rec on there. That's good. Okay. Well, there you go. This is another way. This is Melissa's secret way to make sure that you're all like listening and alive and engaged and participating, even though it's morning on day 3.
Well,
Wait,
my actual motivation is to get to know people and to learn more about what they like to watch and make connections.
oh, okay. So you actually care about people as people.
I care about people, yes.
Nice. Okay, who's the Star Trek fan then? Who's the Star Trek fan?
That would be me.
Haroon?
Yes,
Okay, and specifically Enterprise?
specifically Enterprise.
I have not watched that series, so
This is really the oldest one when they started the space travel with Archer.
well, when you say the oldest one, I'm thinking about the 80s when we used to watch.
No, not the oldest one. It's they go back in time and recreate that era when they were still doing the experimentation for warp speed.
There you go. Who's the Doctor Who fan?
That is me, Sam.
Hey, Sam. Doctor Who fans are, it's like people, sci-fi people either are hardcore Doctor Who or they can't touch it. And that's kind of interesting. I don't know why. It's very divisive.
It's very clever.
Mhm.
Maybe you have to have a certain cleverness. Is that what you're saying? It's smart humor.
Yes.
You have to be
You have
smart.
to think about it sometimes to get it. Yeah.
Sam, who is your favorite doctor?
Tenant.
Mine too.
Yeah.
Brainy.
David and Rose all the way.
Okay, you can't just put a picture of an ocean and say that's your movie.
Lost?
Oh, is that Lost? Oh, okay.
That's my guess. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I didn't think of Lost when I put it, but yeah, it's Lost. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else you want to get to know here, Melissa? Let's see. Who did it? Oh, what's this? What's the cartoon behind Schitt's Creek?
Oh, it's Rick and Morty. It's a story about a mad scientist grandfather and the grandson. So they travel through time. It's a crazy show. You probably should check it out if you haven't seen it. Yeah.
Okay, so
Raunchy adult comedy.
Yeah, right.
Raunchy adult cartoon. So does it speak to the mad scientist inside you, Kazi?
I just love the show. It's full of sense of humor, like the activity. I mean, the scientist is like amazing. It's just out of the world. Sometimes it gets kind of sarcastic and dark. So it's a different comedy, but some people really love it. So yeah.
Okay. And of course, the Blues Brothers. Who's the Blues Brothers fan?
I am, because I'm a musician as well. So Martin.
Marty, that's a classic too. You can't go wrong with the Blues Brothers. And I don't know this without a trace. Is that like a detective show or something, or a cop show? So like
Yes, it's they look for people that actually are they vanish without a trace. So they are in New York, and I'm a New York fan. So
okay, cool. A little bit CSI like almost.
yes, CSI New York is also my favorite. But I thought of Without a Trace first. So
I wonder if real detectives and investigators are that beautiful and handsome. When you look at like the CSI and all this stuff, they're always like, wow. Well, very cool. Oh, there it is, full screen. How fun. Okay, well, thanks everyone for sharing that. I think the next thing we're going to do is introduce, oh, hey, we're going to introduce a couple of my people. Look at this. Jenny, are you going to do these introductions? Who's up?
Sure. Well, first off, I just want to let y'all know that we have some tech help. So in addition to me, you have some additional people that you can turn to for help. And I'll let them introduce themselves in a minute, but I kind of want to explain their roles so it's a bit clearer for you. So Carly is going to be helping me with tech reviews. So that's after your modules are complete, you'll be hearing more from Carly. However, Easton and Josh have a more interactive role with y'all. They will be available to answer questions via email, and they will also be performing technical reviews when your modules are complete. So obviously, if you have a question during the workshop, I'm here for you. I will answer your questions, but if you have anything, you know, outside of workshop hours or questions post-workshop, you may need to direct your questions towards Easton or Josh. And if you check out the assigned points of contact spreadsheet, it has been updated. So some of you have Easton and Josh assigned to you, and their emails are available in that sheet as well. So Carly, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself, university, grade you're in, what you're doing, et cetera, et cetera?
And why don't you unshare the slide so we can see her full screen? It's a little more personal.
That would be Melissa.
Oh yeah, Melissa, will you do stop screen sharing for a second?
So hi everyone, I'm Carly. I go to UL in Lafayette. I just finished my undergrad in civil engineering and I will be starting grad school in the fall, concentrating in water resources. And yeah.
Yay, nice to meet you, Carly.
Nice to see y'all.
And these next two are work with me in the hydroinformatics lab at BYU. So Josh and Easton, are you guys here?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yep, I'm a research assistant for Dr. Ames at BYU, and I'm currently studying my undergrad. So it's super cool to be here. I'm going to be a junior in the program, super interested in water resources, and I've been working in HydroLearn, helping Dr. Ames create a few modules. So I'll do my best to help answer questions. And like Jenny said, I'll be here for you guys.
Awesome.
Hey guys, nice to meet you guys. I'm pretty much the exact same as Josh. Pretty much the exact same spot in my undergraduate in civil engineering, and just a research assistant for Dr. Ames, and really happy to be here. If you guys have anything, any questions, just shoot me an email. I'm ready and attentive just by any part of the day, so to send one and I'll get back to you as quickly as possible, but super happy to meet all you guys.
And what Josh and Easton don't know is that when we go into new baby, I don't want to be on this workshop mode, which sounding like it's going to be Monday. I might ask Josh and Easton to jump in and help a little bit in my absence here or there. So you might get a more chance to get to know them.
All right, so I know that we're all excited to have that additional help and expertise. So feel free to shout out to them, and Jenny also, you'll see, because you have the link to the side, has added their contact to the assigned points of contact. So of course you can always ask Jenny a question, but it's hard for her to help 11 groups at once. So you can also email your assigned point of contact for your tech contact. All right, so I'm actually gonna move the slides around just a bit. And Jenny, as I explain this, I think that we are ready to shift the rooms. So will you shift those rooms for me, please? So we are going to do a scavenger hunt here in just a minute. We wanted to kind of highlight different parts of existing modules for you in the first couple of days, but now we really want to give you time to dig into one module.
Three of us go and meet with Eileen.
And what we're going to ask you to do, so we're going to put you in your room with your partner. So you and your partner will pick which one of these modules you want to look at. Of course, it makes the most sense to pick a module that is closely related to your topic. If there's another module in HydroLearn that's not listed here that you want to look at, just call me into your room. There are reasons why we've picked these for you to look at. So if there's another one, just call me and I'll let you know if I think that's a good fit for you to look at or not. And then what you're going to do is you're going to choose one module and skim through it. So you have 30 minutes for this task. You're looking for the overall driving problem in the module. You're also, right, so a lot of modules have those up front. We kind of looked at some of those yesterday, where they situate the problem right from the very start, like the snow and climate module does. Then after you've identified the driving problem, sorry, I'm bouncing all over the place. So you're going to put your name and your partner's name here, because you're going to do this together, the title of the module you selected, and you're going to write, what is that overall driving problem? You're going to put it here. So everyone's going to be working in the same spreadsheet. So in this way, in addition to going in depth into one module, you'll also have kind of a global overall view of other modules. So you could decide if there's another one you want to look at. So you're looking for that overall driving problem. Then you're looking at the learning activities, and you want to find one learning activity. Of course, you're welcome to do more than one, but let's start off with one that is a high cognitive demand task. And then we want you to think about what makes it high cognitive demand. And of course, you have the access to the slides from yesterday if you want to look at kind of how we delineate high and low cognitive demand. And so you will tell us which learning activity is a high cognitive demand task and why you think that. So that might be, for instance, you might write learning activity 3.1 and put the title of that learning activity and why you think that's high cognitive demand. Then the next thing you're going to do, remember today, is focused on learning activities and rubrics. So you're going to look at the rubric associated with that learning activity, and you're going to evaluate, you yourself will evaluate whether it provides adequate assessment criteria for the student or instructor. And I will tell you that I have never seen a rubric that couldn't be improved. That even goes for my own rubrics that I've created and revised year after year. I still always find places that they could be better. So don't be afraid to offer opportunities for improvement. And so, but your goal is really to learn from what others have done before you, right? And so you're gonna, of course, include that assessment here in the spreadsheet. And then the last thing we want is for you to kind of reflect. So now thinking about this module that you've spent time going into, what can you learn from this module? What are your takeaways for your own module? How has this maybe informed or changed what you want to do? All right, so that is a lot of steps. So I'll give you a minute to read through the steps and pose any questions. You can pose a question by raising your hand, by unmuting, or by putting a question in the chat. Great, so the link to the sheet is right here in the scavenger hunt spreadsheet. I'm sorry, what is it called? Slides, but I will also put it in the tab for you. Yeah, so I see Sina and Zara already jumping right in there in groundwater flow. So if you just copy from here and paste into the other cell, it's going to take up 2 rows. So what you can do is you can copy, and then I'll just show you a Google trick. If you right click and you do paste special, values only, it'll just take up 1 row rather than taking up 2 rows for you there. Sorry, so if you want to copy, for instance, groundwater flow, you could paste special, values only, and it'll show up in just 1. All right, so it seems like people are already at work, which is exciting. Jenny, do we have the breakout rooms ready to go?
Yes.
All right, so Jenny's going to put you in your breakout rooms with your partner, and we'll be in these rooms for 30 minutes. So till about 10:55 or 55 minutes after whatever hour you are in. All right, Jenny, go ahead and open the rooms. As always, I'll hang back here in case you have any questions. Esther, are you able to get into your breakout room? Esther, are you able to get into your breakout room?
I see her there, but I don't know if that's a static image. Is that just her screenshot?
Yeah, so she doesn't have her video on, but she hasn't joined her breakout room yet. I know she was having some internet issues yesterday. All right, I'm gonna go check in on some rooms. All right, so hopefully that was a really productive conversation for you and your team. I will start off by acknowledging that that was not enough time for anyone to go through a module. When we do our reviews, at least when I do a review of a module, it takes me 3 to 5 hours to go through the module and write up the review. So I absolutely recognize that 30 minutes is not enough time. What we're going to do with this, just to let you know where we're going, is as we move on through the hackathon, we'll give you more opportunities to either come back to, actually there'll be a time when we ask you specifically to come back to this very same module, but with a different lens. So not looking at the high cognitive demand learning activities and rubric, but instead looking at the content and the way the content is presented through the videos and pictures and diagrams and the way that text is broken out. So we'll ask you to do that. I don't know if we're going to do it tomorrow or Friday, but that's something that's coming up. So we'll ask you to come back to this module. So I just want you to know that I just want to acknowledge there wasn't enough time, and that is okay, because the idea was to get you thinking and disperse some conversations. And from the rooms I visited, I think that is definitely happening. Another point that I want to make is, so you keep hearing me talking about we want like a 10-hour module. Imad has encouraged me to allow to also voice the fact that those might be a little longer than 10 hours. But the reason that we're trying to push you towards that kind of smaller chunk is most of these modules are considerably longer than 10 hours. And the fellows, it took them quite a bit of effort and time to create that entire module. And in some cases, that meant they weren't able to implement it in their classes when they wanted to. And we want to avoid that. We want your modules to be complete and ready for the start of the semester, which is where one reason that we're encouraging that smaller chunk, although I will acknowledge that Imad has asked me to also say that the 10-hour isn't fixed and you could go a little bit beyond that if you want, but know that the more hours you're creating for student work, the more you're putting into the module, the longer it will take you to design and create that module. So when you're thinking about it, think about how you can break off a chunk that will work for you. Okay, so I would like to have kind of an open discussion now about the things that you found out and the things that you noticed. And I want to focus first on that learning activity, this column D here. So what did you notice kind of generally about those learning activities that you looked at? Feel free to unmute or to raise your hand or to put it in the chat. What did you notice about the learning activities, in particular the high cognitive demand? Yeah, Josh, would you mind unmuting and tell us more about that? You said it was a massive amount of work.
So we looked at the data science and earth and environmental sciences module, which is ambitious, right? It is supposed to take someone who's unfamiliar with R and Python and get them to be doing machine learning by the end of it. And so in and of that, that is an ambitious undertaking. And so the capstone project is what it was called, which included a proposal, a data set search, methods and packages search, and then coding and report writing, which is just huge. And that was the biggest thing that we took away from it, because it is like, that would take the entirety of like our 10-hour goal and probably beyond. And so that was our biggest takeaway, was that it was ambitious. And the criticism associated with that was that there's lots of room in there for students to get frustrated because of how ambitious, but also how open-ended it was. So like, we felt like there could have been a lot more steering language to help avoid some of that.
Yeah, so that's a great point. And Dan, I don't know if you want to weigh in on that module at all.
Yeah, that was a very ambitious module for sure. And I don't know that we were quite as specific last year in encouraging people to scope these in a little bit. So that team was ambitious and successful. But don't let that scare you off or make you think that you need to do something quite that big for your exercise.
Yeah, from a stats education perspective, it is a lot to teach in a online module.
So we also reviewed that module, and that was my comment. So one of the questions was review the variable importance factors and discuss how those impacted the results. And I was thinking that's like a prelims question for some of my PhD students. And so, I assumed like if I was going to implement this module in my class, I would have to do a full lecture beforehand to kind of point the students towards what the actual bar is they're trying to clear. Because I've read that and I was like, oh, I could answer that, but I don't know, if I was talking to a statistician, like you're saying, Melissa, they'd probably laugh at me. So.
Yeah, so we actually had, go ahead, Eileen.
Well, yeah, we kind of noticed the same thing with ours, is there was a lot in that learning activity. And in terms of usability for other people, maybe breaking it up into even smaller chunks so that people could more easily just grab a part of it might make it more useful for other people. If there's just one section of that learning activity you wanted to use, it's a little bit harder if it's all in one place. But then it makes for more sections. I don't know, it's kind of a trade-off, but yeah, I felt like, there were low and high cognitive tasks in the learning activity. There was all kinds of stuff. There was a tutorial there, you know, so maybe breaking things up a little bit more in terms of activities.
Yeah, so with the module that you were looking at, Eileen, the Introduction to Hydrologic Design in PC Swim, so that whole module is situated on this one problem of evaluating how development affects the Wake Forest campus. And so the kind of pieces build, I will say, I don't know if you were looking at kind of the final learning activity, but that module was created by 3 faculty, and some of them are 3 fellows. And one of them was just going to use the first 2 sections, I believe, in her class. And then the other one was using, another faculty, I think, was using either all 3 or just sections 2 and 3. So it was kind of a matter of creating something that could kind of run that spectrum. So not everyone was going to do all parts of it. But yeah, I like how you pointed out that learning activities can have low and high cognitive demand tasks in them, right? Like sometimes you have to tell students how to calculate this thing so they can calculate it so that they can analyze it or make an evaluation of that, of those different calculations. So definitely a learning activity itself can have both, can meet both high and low cognitive demand learning objectives. Martin, go for it.
Yeah, I'm also worried about how ambitious some of these modules are. And to add to what you said at the beginning, Melissa, one other argument for, you know, maybe don't make them so long is that the chances that a module gets adopted is probably much higher when it's short versus when it's long, right? So in my mind, that's another motivation. But one way to maybe overcome this problem is if we are conscious when we design these modules about that aspect, and if we could maybe design the sections in such a way that they could be used separately and maybe give potential adopters some guidance at the beginning in the introduction saying, you know, you could just do section 1 and 2, or you could start at section 3, you know, and go to 5 or something like that, right? So some guidance for the faculty so that it's a little bit more flexible. If somebody wants to do the whole thing, you're welcome. But also allow them to pick elements out and make it easy for those people to or say if you feel like it's possible to do this.
Yeah, I think that's also a great point, Martin, that one of the other reasons why we do want these to be, we want your modules to be a little smaller is so that people can pick and choose and put different modules together. And also so they'll be more likely to find something that fits their needs. Yeah.
And if I may comment on that too. So Martin, what you described is very useful for others when they want to adopt your module. And that's why we encourage in the very first part of the module, the about page or the introduction, you can describe that. You can say, this is how the module can be implemented. You can implement section 1 and 2 and stop there, or you know, you can, section 3 is independent of 1 and 2. If an instructor wants to teach this, then they can use that section. And sometimes this information is very valuable for others to adopt.
Absolutely. So what are so we've talked about some of the limitations with the modules that you looked at. What are some of the things that you were like, oh, that's cool, I never thought to do that, or some kind of takeaways that were more inspiring for you?
So back to that data science and environmental sciences module. I actually really like the module. The part on fire, you know, the West is on fire right now. And so this is very relevant to the students. And you know, a lot of our environmental science students, they'll be doing fire science. So I got excited with the video they included. I was like, yeah, I want to come back and do this. So I imagine students would be the same as well. Maybe not as excited, but, you know, similarly.
Yeah, so I really like, Nate, how you pointed out that the authentic context that's relevant to students' lives, that's engaging, it really makes you want to just jump in and start learning about it. That intrinsic motivation there. What else was maybe a light bulb moment or something that you liked?
In the one that, sorry, go on. All right. In the one that Sebnem and I reviewed, David was also there and he shared his insight. We had a really good discussion. On the one of the positive sides that we noticed was one of the activities had this recommendation. So based on some of the properties that the students see, how they recommend, what X, Y, and Z. And I thought that was a very important activity to include, because in real life, that's pretty much what we can do, recommend and let the client choose from the best option in terms of cost, effectiveness, and stuff. So I thought that kind of tied up well with a real life application. And on the next, sorry, I'm going to some of the negative side while I have a mic here. We had a interesting debate about whether a certain task would qualify as a high cognitive or low cognitive, because right there in between. And as I was thinking more and hearing about the other groups, is that a necessary thing that we need to make clear that this is a high cognitive task? Mainly from an educator's perspective. Students, may or may not be too much interested in that. But if I want to include a high cognitive task, does that have to be exclusively clear in the module?
That's a good question. So I think if your learning activity is clearly connected to your learning objectives, and those learning objectives are at high levels of Bloom's, then that should make it clear enough without you having to spell it out. All right, Sina, would you like to jump in?
So I just wanted to say at the end of their module, they had a glossary of keywords and concepts. And I thought it's a really good idea to have that so that we can all agree on a sort of a consistent framework of keywords and concepts that we use throughout the module. And in our module, we'll definitely put a link of that at the beginning of the module as well, so that they know such thing exists if they need to go and check those keywords.
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out, Tina. And that's one of the things we'll talk about later this week. But this module, the groundwater flow, they use bolded words throughout their content. And then those bolded words, they included in their glossary. Of course, I'm going to go to the pages where there aren't very many bold words, but and maybe here they switch to italics. But so a way to kind of highlight those words, which is especially useful for students as they're kind of picking up on this jargon of the field. All right, so lots of things that we've learned here. One of the other reasons I wanted to do this activity was to make sure that you had time to kind of dig into a module and to see, you can always go back to any of those existing modules for ideas. And so now you kind of have an in-depth look at one. You may decide to go back to that module as you're writing your learning activities to see how they've done things. Louis, what would you like to share?
Thanks, Melissa. I was just going to say something I liked. We did the hydrologic droughts and drying rivers. And there was a lot of data analysis, but there was also a really big focus on like presentation of their results to stakeholders. And so not just, having the whole thing being motivated by a relevant real world problem, but actually getting students to think about how to convey the relevance of their results to people that are then interested in that problem. And so the very last learning activity that we looked at was to actually make a presentation that really encapsulates all of the analysis that they had done up to that point, but then really focus on like, okay, well, how do you get people to care about your analysis and about this problem? And yeah, sure, scientists are nerds and we love to think about these things, but like conveying that importance to stakeholders is definitely a different question. So they did a nice job of weaving that through the entire module.
Awesome, thanks for pointing that out. So I wanted to point out, we know that people learn when they look at kind of finished products as models, but we also learn when we look at what our peers are doing. And so we have asked Alex and Sam if they would share what they're working on for their learning activities. And one of the reasons that I asked, or that we chose to ask them to share, is because they did one of the things that actually Eileen brought up when she was looking at her module just now is they have one high cognitive demand activity or task, and they divided it into 3 learning activities. So all 3, each learning activity builds into the other, building students towards the one high cognitive demand task. So I will stop sharing and let Alex and Sam show you what they've been thinking about.
All right, I'll share my screen and go to the tab with what we've been doing. I can find it. Give me a second. All right, there we go. Share screen. All right, so I just want to say off the bat that I've found this experience to be very useful, enjoyable. And sometimes you go in class and then you learn about something and then like, that's not going to happen. But in this case, like it's actually happening, right? And so it's been really great because there's been this iterative process where, we started off over here and then, maybe we moved over here and then we're over there and then we're over here. And then it's like, but then we're making progress. And so kudos to the PIs for giving us this opportunity to do this. And so in summary, we were thinking about something related to saltwater intrusion, and that saltwater intrusion problem initially focused on actual qualitative data, right? Now looking at perhaps specific conductivities or looking at chloride concentrations, right? Because I've done some work in that field and I have those data. But then one of the things that Melissa talked about was transferability. Like, so how can somebody else do that? And so we said, well, maybe we can go into the sort of flow regime, and then within that flow regime, that could speak to the qualitative aspect. And what that does, then it opens up the door for people to then find data publicly, because there's more, groundwater level data than you have water quality data online. And so again, that's the iterative process that we're talking about. So then we said, well, where can we get those data? The USGS has data. So we just have to go to the USGS website and then get that data. But then the data, in searching for the data, it's really messy, it's not straightforward. Even the website itself might be clunky, but then we thought that in itself is a process that students need to understand and be able to conquer, right? Because even as we do that, so why should we clean it up and then give it to them where they can go through that process? And so in terms of the high cognitive demand, the text that we came up with is on the screen. It says increased population in the eastern seaboard of the United States has led to municipalities increasing their withdrawals from numerous groundwater wells in coastal aquifers over time. Your consultancy firm has been hired by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to assess the vulnerability of communities in coastal regions to saltwater intrusion. You will lead a team of scientists to develop a report that will be submitted to the U.S. EPA. The report should use publicly available data to create maps, apply indices, develop mitigation plans, and utilize other products that will form the basis of recommendations that will be made to the agency about how municipalities on the east coast of the US should address the threat of saltwater intrusion while they experience growing populations. And so ultimately, again, when we were talking yesterday in our group, there was a mention about, looking at this big picture, and then once you have this big picture, then you can break it down in smaller pieces. And so for me, that's how I sort of think. And so ultimately, then we have this big picture, but then we've got these sort of parts: publicly available data, apply indices, develop mitigation plans, and so on. And so then it was easy then to go to the activities, right? And so, and I had a note here, which I thought was a great note before I move on. Melissa suggested that the way that we've designed this, it might work really well with cooperative learning. And then some wasn't available in the meeting yesterday. And then I was so texting him, I was like, she said, we should do cooperative learning. And then he was like, yeah, it's a great idea. And then that brought up some other conversations that we had and how we can incorporate that. And so we are thinking, initially I was thinking, how can we do this so that there is no gaps in the students' knowledge? And then I said, well, what we could do is we could have different students tackle different cities. And so each group would actually go through all the 4 activities for their specific city. And then ultimately they'll come back together and then they'll put everything together to make this recommendation. And so I thought great suggestion in terms of cooperative learning. So we're going to try and incorporate that. And so in a nutshell, we have different activities, activity 1, and then these are the results that they'll get. These are the resources that we have established. And then these are the instructions. And then there's some summary questions at the end. And then when they're done with that, then they move on to the next stage. But then the activities build on the previous activity, right? So you first need to acquire the data, right? You acquire the data and pre-process it. And then once you do that, then you can analyze it and make interpretations. And then after that, you can then create these groundwater vulnerability indices. And so we have to figure out how to word that. That's why they're in italics. But I'm thinking of maybe using an evaluation rubric where students would develop something like this. So here's an example of a results template that maybe we can give them this results template that's related to earthquakes, but then they should then develop something similar that they can apply to the groundwater world with respect to saltwater intrusion. And so they can just rank or assign a score. If you proximity to 40, if you're far, it's 1. And if you're close, then it's 3, and then so on. So the one with the highest number has the highest risk. The one with the lowest number has the lowest risk, and so on and so forth. So Sam, do you want to add on to anything that I've said?
Yeah, and, not too much, but yeah. So the most important thing for us is to make sure that because when we do the cooperative learning, we're trying to make sure that we assess all the students on their learning objectives, and so breaking up into cities makes a lot of sense, because then because we're assessing the different module learning objectives as we go through, and of course there's some that we're assessing multiple times as we go through, and then at the very end we get to assess that, and part of what we do is once we've developed these, we're going to look at just the time it might take to accomplish each of these, and we may decide or recommend you don't have, there's some that there's one that you might skip in here, the third one, but the other 2 you have to have them to come. There's one you might skip and one you might not skip. So this is one that we need to design in such a way that can be adopted with modification in terms of what data you use or what questions one asks. And you can also change from saltwater intrusion. You can change this to other contaminants, pretty much. So the assessing vulnerability can be related to other contaminants, as you say. So it can be adapted in that sense by anybody who picks up, or even us as we develop it. Who knows what ideas we'll get tomorrow, because we're always coming up with new things. But that's where we are for now, and that's our thought process.
Yeah, thanks, Eileen, for your positive comment in the chat, and thanks, Alex and Sam, for sharing. What questions might you all have for Alex and Sam?
Even suggestions. They don't have questions. Even just suggestions or ideas. And one of the things that we are working through is the creation of the creation of the indices, and just some of the best ways to go about getting that. And then another question I might pose or request suggestion for is when making the maps, we definitely would like them to use computer software. And so if you have any ideas, we found a few online sites that have contouring tools, but if you know some tools that work very well and easy to access for everyone, then we might develop instructions for that. So we haven't developed instructions for a particular tool to do the contouring at this point.
Well, I don't have a suggestion, but I just want to give a comment. I really like the first sentence the motivation statement. It immediately caught my attention, and I think that was a great start for this learning activity, especially activity, I think, number 1 or number 2, I guess. Right there, it's increased population on the eastern seaboard of the United States has led to the municipalities increasing their withdrawals from numerous groundwater wells in coastal aquifers over time. So this immediately points out an important problem, and I think this will attract the students' attention significantly to focus on basically the rest of it. So I like this part.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good point, Frat. Alex and Sam really hook the students with the problem right from the first sentence. It reminds me of what Nate was saying about the fires in California. You just get hooked right from the beginning with the problem. Alex, I think Ahmad had posted in the chat a question asking how long do you think the module will require for student time with these 4 activities?
Right, so we're just having that conversation with Sam. Initially, I said, when we started, I thought they'll only be able to do this in 4 hours, and then now it's like it's been evolving, it's becoming this monster, like we have to bring under control. And so right now we think 10 to 12, and then as Sam was saying that we might have to adjust once we get, a lot of meeting, we might have to adjust it down so that it's less than that time. And in my mind, part of the problem is here, data acquisition and processing, right? This is where the time sink is. Getting the data, and then but once they have that, then the rest is pretty much click a button and then you have it, and then you develop your indices and then you make your conclusions. And so we'd have to think about once we have everything established, go through a trial run and then see just how long this will take us. But I don't think we're aiming for 10 as well, maybe 12, but definitely around the 10 hour mark.
Great. Eileen?
Yeah, one comment there, like you said, the data acquisition is often places where students get really lost in looking for data, and it's this trade-off between giving them the freedom to choose a place they're interested in, or maybe like a second option would be just to have links to 3 or 4 interesting coastal cities that you've already identified. There's good data that exists and you can link them straight there. I'm also thinking from an instructor perspective, it's a little daunting to grade 24 different maps with data that you may not be familiar with yourself. And so just an option in there, like if you don't want to let students choose wherever, then choose this area or choose this subset of areas that you've already kind of verified that there's appropriate data there.
Yeah, actually for this one, we're actually giving them the cities. So we've actually, so the way we've designed this one, we've given them 4 cities. We gave them a Norfolk and a city in Florida and 2 cities in Georgia. So to start the module, we're actually giving that, and to be up to the instructor to decide whether they want to use those cities, because I know this problem is all over. So they can choose the cities next to where they are, where they have data, or they can, if they're adventurous, they can let us choose the cities. But for our particular one, we're actually choosing 4 places. And then one of the options, and you're right, that finding data and just clean up can be daunting. And if it ends up, once we run through it, it's end up being too much, we may actually provide the data in a certain way that they'll still require some processing on their part, but maybe not so much on downloading it from the original site. But we'll see as we go through it. But thank you for that. We also considered giving them just the cities to start with, and even for ourselves, just so that we know that this actually works.
As a suggestion, and I know this may still add to the module, but you can almost like have it as an optional or maybe a standalone section at the end of the module saying, if you want to acquire your own data, these are the steps that you need to go through, or something like that. Almost like an appendix or something.
Yeah, that's good.
This way it does not take away from the module itself, but hey, if you want to look, excuse me, if you want to learn about how to get the data, this is how you typically do it.
So thank you so much, Alex and Sam, for sharing. Hopefully, for the rest of you, you're able to have spark some thinking. You certainly don't have to divide it up in the way that Alex and Sam have, but I wanted to have them present that as an option for you, for something for you to think about. So we're going to jump into talking about building rubrics. We're going to talk about kind of the theory behind it for a little bit, and then we're going to talk about the how to do it in HydroLearn. And then we'll take our break. And by break, I mean working time with your partners. So in order to build a rubric, we really want to start with the learning objectives. So if we're staying true to the constructive alignment, then starting with the learning objectives will help us build a rubric. And sometimes as you take the learning objectives you've already written, you take the learning activity you've created and you start building the rubric, and you realize there are things in your learning activity that aren't in your learning objectives. And so then you end up needing to add a learning objective or revise a learning objective, because sometimes what you create in the learning activity is sometimes that shows what you actually really are valuing for students. And if that is what your value that your students be able to do, then that needs to show up right in the learning objectives. So we're going to, hopefully everyone's on these slides and you can follow along with me. So we're going to take a look at the learning objectives for the Beaubassin module. And then we're also going to look at the learning activity for the Beaubassin module. So I put both those links in the chat for you. I'm going to split my screen here. So here we have the learning objectives. I'll give you a minute to read these 6 learning objectives here. And my first question for you, the thing I want you to think about as you're reading, is which are low cognitive demand and which are high cognitive demand. And go ahead and put it in the chat when you have an idea, which is low, which are low, and which are high. Yeah, so I see some comments in the chat, some dittos, that these 1 through 3, these first 3 are low. So they basically progress in order of blooms, right? And then the bottom 3 are high ones. Yeah, so Dave, that's a good point with item 5. So assess the impact sounds like it's high, but depending on how we ask students to assess the impact, and if we give them exactly what they have to do to assess the impact, we might consider it to be lower. One thing that I like about this is it was a learning objective for students to be able to navigate the software. Sometimes that in and of itself is an important learning objective if the software is something that's important for your students to be able to use and navigate. So I have put the link for this learning activity in the chat. If you're enrolled in the course, then that link should have taken you directly to the learning activity. If you're not enrolled in the course, then you'll have to go view the course and then go to modeling, detention basin, with HEC HMS and learning activity. This is the final learning activity of the module, and there are other kind of tasks within this section of the module. So we don't necessarily expect every learning objective to be in this task, in this activity, because they might be covered in Check Your Understandings or other learning activities in this section. But we want to see, does the learning activity assess or ask students to do anything that's not included in the learning objectives? Because if so, maybe we need to revise our learning objectives. And again, I just want to reiterate that this is not perfect, that we've revised and iterated it over time. This is a very well done, but certainly always has room for improvement. Hopefully David will be okay with me saying that about his module. So take a minute and read through this learning activity and think about the learning objectives that it is aligned with. Actually, I guess this one is Ahmad's revision of Dave's module. So this has seen lots of iterations. So if we just first look at the constructive alignment between the summary questions and the learning objectives, what do you see? If we look at the first, actually just look at those 3 summary questions, and which learning objectives do you think they align with? Or should we add learning objectives, or should we revise learning objectives? What alignment do you see? Maybe what alignment is unclear or missing? Go ahead and put in the chat. What alignment do you see between the questions and the objectives, and what might be unclearly aligned or missing? Thanks for commenting in the chat, Eileen. As you notice alignment or opportunities for revision, feel free to post those in the chat. Thanks, Debnem, for your contribution. What other thoughts do people have about the alignment or opportunities for improvement? Okay. So people are seeing the alignment then, it sounds like, from the comments I'm seeing in the chat, where summary question 1 is asking students to discuss the effect of different design parameters and pros and cons of each option and the implications. So we see that that really kind of aligns with a learning objective 5, assess the impact of various design parameters.
But what I just typed in the chat is just a question. I'm not sure I see a second part of that with the implications for specifically economic and environmental perspectives. I don't know if I see that in a learning objective.
Oh, so you're looking at the ABET outcomes?
No, I'm looking at summary question 1.
Oh, here.
It says, what are the implications of these design parameters? I see where there's hydrologic implications, but I'm not sure I see economic and environmental perspectives in the learning objectives.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, maybe this learning objective could be revised to have a condition added to the end of from hydrologic, economic, and environmental perspectives. So maybe this learning objective could use an additional condition. Would that help?
Maybe in learning 6 and objective 6, probably maybe 5 and 6, right? Yeah, 6.
Maybe they both need those.
I think 6 is probably more because it talks about analyze the relationships and trade-offs. Yeah. That's where the trade, well, yeah, between the two, I guess. Yeah.
It might be important to call out that the trade-offs should consider things like economic and environmental perspectives. I guess where you locate a detention basin has environmental impact, and I don't know the degree to which the module gets into that, but it's certainly an opportunity for expansion. And economics, I mean, there's sort of an implication that the bigger a detention basin is, the more it costs, but there's no quantification of that.
Yeah, and if we had looked through that, maybe it is more explicit in the activities, but we haven't looked at those, so maybe there's more.
Yeah, great point. So there, I don't believe there is very much at all in this module actually about the economic or environmental impacts. Is there, Dave and Ahmad?
There isn't. So I guess it's certainly, it was kind of just thrown out there as, and maybe we didn't do it justice, that while this exercise was helping engineers with the technical considerations, these other things also need to be considered.
Right.
Yeah.
But there's a danger if you sort of limit engineers to only focusing on the technical considerations, you may not do justice to these other things which are equally as important.
If they're equally as important, should we perhaps include some sections or units on them within the module?
Probably.
Which is already a bit of a beast. Yeah, and so maybe another way to handle that though would be, what are the implications from a hydrologic perspective? And then from your perspective, or given what you know, what are some of the, so something that makes the economic and environmental, recognizes that they haven't learned a lot about that through this course. Interesting. So I actually, we've had lots of conversations about the alignment of this, and I had not really picked up on that component of it yet. Thanks. So every time we have one of these alignment conversations, we pick out something new. Okay, so the next thing I want you to take a look at then, now we've looked through the summary questions, is the rubric itself. And so I'm not going to be able to be focused on the entire rubric because it's quite long. But if you have it open your own window, you can scroll through it. So what do you notice about the alignment or opportunities for alignment between the learning objectives and the rubric?
Well, one of the things that Sam and I talked about when we were reviewing the module in the first segment was that in that rubric, it seemed to us that there were some items that were more so focused on presence or absence of some information without necessarily considering whether the information was correct. And so, for example, if we look at this very rubric, the second row and then the last column, right? It says image is included, contains correct information and is easy to read. And so we thought that that correct information was missing in the other rubric, where we would have said image is included and is easy to read, right? And then that's just mere absence of presence. But then that element should actually provide the correct information. So, so that's something that, you know, when we were looking at the rubric, we're like, well, that's something that we probably need to pay attention to as we're moving on, because then the students can actually say, but I was clear and concise, but you are wrong. Yeah, but I was clear and concise, right? And so including that, that clarity that you have to have correct information, or at least information that is relevant or is reasonable, if not correct, because sometimes it might still be fuzzy in terms of what results they might get. So, so I like that we saw this outcome in this particular rubric, that yes, there's the presence, but then it also has to be correct.
Great. And if you're making notes to yourself right now, I think that's a great point, Alex, is to write down, don't forget, make sure information is correct in the rubric, right? Ask for that correctness. Oh, that's an interesting point, Alyssa, that creating the hydrograph is actually learning objective 2. So maybe the second row should say, yeah, 1 and 2, because if you're able to navigate HEC-HMS, then you are able to create the hydrograph. Or rather, if you're able to create the hydrograph, then that is an indicator that you're able to navigate HEC-HMS. Great point.
Didn't actually see in a lot of the modules that they include multiple learning objectives, like summative. And that's something with ours, like we're like building to learning objective 5. So like by the time we get learning objective 5, we'll be hitting 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, or you know what I mean? So is that something, how should we address that?
So great point. So what you're asking, I think, let me just clarify, is that the associated learning objective on the rubric might actually be meeting multiple learning objectives. So for instance, in order for a student to develop several potential designs, they have to be able to do really a lot of the earlier learning objectives. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, okay. And so what we want to think about when we're thinking about the alignment in the rubric itself is we want to pick the objective that is most closely aligned with that, with that, whatever that item is that we're assessing. So even though doing this, developing several potential designs may require them to be navigating HEC-HMS, to be constructing unit hydrographs and everything below, we really want to align it to the one it's closest to. Yeah, good. I'm glad that clarifies, Alyssa, because the reason we want to do that is because it helps us know which learning objective are our students having success with or not having success with? And we can take that then as feedback. Well, if they're consistently falling down on learning objective 4, and I know from this rubric, then maybe I need to revise the content of the module to help them meet learning objective, to help them learn how to do that. So picking the one that it most closely aligns with is probably a better strategy. So Sina, I know, pointed out that perhaps more levels. So there is no, to my knowledge, there's no research on the ideal number of levels in a rubric. Personally, I typically use 5-level rubrics just because it allows for more variability. With lower level tasks though, so a lot of times I'll use a rubric, and like we're pointing out here, a lot of the learning activities have some low level tasks and some high cognitive demand tasks. So even if I have a 5-point rubric, I might only have 3 columns worth for my low tasks, but still 5 columns worth for the high tasks, because you can distribute the points however you want. But sometimes there's just not that much variability. It's either included in correct or included in not correct. You might have some shades of how not correct it is, but there may not be room for a 5-point variability there. All right, Frat, I see your hand up.
Yes, I mean, along with that line, I was wondering if there's any partial grading, because, for example, what I noticed is that for the summary questions, the first summary question, the lowest, level 1 is, I think, 2 points or 3 points or so. Let's assume that student did not submit anything for that. Is it still 2 or 3? The levels, that's why maybe Sina was mentioning about 5, more levels, etc. Or maybe there is a partial grading embedded in it. I don't know.
Yeah, another great question. So any faculty who takes up a rubric can choose to implement it in the way they want. So if you, Farhat, were to choose to implement this module in your class, you could change all these point values, you could add extra columns, or you could choose to let students know that if they don't submit something, that there would be a 0 point for that. So the benefit of the rubric is that they allow that differentiation that faculty can change and adapt. And one of the reasons that we will ask you to put points in, which feels kind of strange because you're thinking, well, if everyone can adapt, why would I put my points in? And the reason is to kind of give another faculty member who might take it up an understanding of where you place weight. So here we can see that the most weight is placed on this one, the multiple designs, and creating the tables, because those are both worth 20 points, and we can kind of see how this faculty member chose to divide that out. Eileen.
Yeah, sorry, I ask a lot of questions.
No worries.
So from an implementation standpoint, if you are wanting to use one of these modules in your class, the students, do the students go to the HydroLearn platform to do the module?
Yeah, so there's different ways you can do it. You can, if you remember how you exported and then imported the module template to your own. So you can, every module that exists on HydroLearn has that export link. So you could take this module, export it, import it into your own version and change pieces of it, pull pieces out, copy pieces in. You could do that however you wanted. Or you could also say, I like it as it is. I don't feel like doing all that. I'm just going to tell my students to work through it in HydroLearn. So you have some different options.
Oh, okay, that makes sense, because I was thinking if you wanted to modify a rubric or something, how that would work. So you would have so eventually you might have like 25 different versions of this module, for example, in the HydroLearn. Will that get, how does that work? Does that have the potential to get confusing?
Yeah, so Ahmad or Jenny or Dave, do you want to weigh in on this? I know we've had lots of conversations about this.
I guess the answer is yes, it does have the potential to get confusing. And we don't really have a good solution to that. I mean, we hope that people label in the sort of short description about each module that this is perhaps a copy of such and such a module. that has been adapted for application at such and such a university. And maybe people who are sifting through HydroLearn modules can then sort of see the different takes. And I mean, at some level, it's confusing for an instructor if they find 4 slightly different versions of a module to try and evaluate which one they should start with, because they don't necessarily want to take the time to look through all 4. But but they would at least know the sort of pedigree of them, and maybe use that in making their choices.
And so if it's a minor change, let's say you change the learning objective here or there and the rubric, Jenny, correct me if I'm wrong, if Eileen, for example, makes a copy or a clone of that module, but the changes are so minimal that it does not warrant a new module to be published, can she still share it with her students without having the module publicly available to everybody?
I need to examine, well, really just verify that these settings have not changed since we've updated, those few weeks ago. Right. But I can tell you this, you can set your module to be private and invitation only. So even if it does show up on the course listing, only the students you invite can get in, if that helps.
Yeah, and so that's one of the really kind of cool things. One of the things that Ahmad and Dave and Dan were thinking about when they designed HydroLearn right from the very beginning is how could we make this adaptable? So for instance, if you really like everything about this module, but you don't want it to be set in Louisiana, you could pull out those data and insert your location or your case. And you could keep all their information about design of detention basins, but you could, and all their essential understandings, but then you could just set it within a different location. So it does require a bit of work on your part, but it allows for that adaptation.
And also, I would encourage that, for example, if you find a minor thing, right, a learning objective that you think can be better written, or a rubric that can be more defined, refined, I think there's nothing wrong with contacting the author and say, hey, I'm interested to use your module, and I think, this and this needs to be revised. I think they will be happy because they know that somebody is interested in their module and is trying to improve it. This way you avoid duplicating a module just for a minor change.
Yeah, great point. So just to kind of recap, a rubric is an assessment tool, and it really in higher ed, it has 2 primary purposes. We want to set very clear expectations for the students, and some of you have brought that up. If it's in the rubric, there's not a lot of wiggle room in argumentation. If your rubric's not that clear, you provide more opportunities for students to either be confused or to argue with your grading later, right? So it can really help kind of streamline those expectations. The other purpose is to simplify grading for instructors. So rubrics, once take a lot of effort to build, but once they're built, grading can go much more quickly. It also helps to make grading more objective. Another use for them, or where they're most useful, is for measuring learning objectives at the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, right? So if it's a computation question and the answer is either right or wrong, and you don't care about how they got there, it's just about the answer, that's not really something you need a rubric for. But where there are different levels at which they could describe or assess the implementation of different parameters on a detention basin, then there's a lot more subjectivity, there's a lot more room for growth, and that's definitely a higher level taxonomy. So that allows us kind of this trajectory that we can create with a rubric. It also can help the instructor keep track of student progress on learning objectives. And so that's something actually Ahmad and Jenny have done, is they've kind of tracked students based on their scores on different items on the rubric to better understand how the learning objectives are being met in their courses. This can also really simplify things if you have a teaching assistant helping you grade, can make sure that your expectations for grading are clearly communicated to the teaching assistant who may be helping you. So I'm going to turn it over to Jenny now, and she's going to show you how to create the rubric in HydroLearn before we send you off to add rubrics to your learning activities.
So can everyone see what should be like a studio screen inside our HydroLearn module template?
Yep, we can see it.
So I briefly went over this yesterday, but I'm going to show you in greater detail exactly how you can add a rubric. So you've probably noticed by now that in the module template, in the learning activity unit, there's already a rubric here for you. But the way that you insert it is to add a new component, click Advanced, and click Rubric Template. So add new component, Advanced, Rubric Template right there. And then to edit it, like every other component, you just hit the Edit button. And then from here, you can actually show y'all a new trick that I learned with this update. If you want to change the width of a column or row, it works in the same manner. You select a cell, and then you select either the column or the row using either of these buttons in their drop-down menus. And then if you hit this cell properties icon right here, you can change the dimensions in any way that you would like right here. And of course, this is in pixels. So the best way to get this right is just through trial and error. What else? If you want to insert something new, just click a cell and then insert column left or right. And again, you can select this column and perhaps make it a little wider like that, etc., etc. So yeah, tables are pretty self-explanatory, but I'm here for questions if you have them.
Jenny, would you show them the question mark, please?
Oh yes, our handy help tool. So this helps, this little help icon on the side brings up our learning objective help information here. So information about, oh, sorry, the rubric, excuse me. So yeah, we have help for rubrics if you just click this little question mark on the side to remind you about the levels, the criterion, levels, point values, and it has a couple examples for you. I'm being summoned apparently. Melissa, I'll stop share. Can you take over? There's someone at my door. Sorry.
All right, so as we're sending you off to work this afternoon on your modules, we just wanted to have front in mind these components of a strong learning activity. You have clear directions, you're including screenshots for those. If it's needed, you have templates for reporting results. You have that authentic task in there to promote high order thinking. Keep thinking about that constructive alignment. As we've been seeing, it's very iterative. Make sure all those learning objectives are present in that learning activity, and the activity is assessing only those learning objectives that you're pulling down into that. So keep thinking about that constructive alignment. And finally, that the rubric is aligned to the objectives and the task. Does the rubric capture how well students do on the learning objectives? So if you go to the next slide, the task in this work session until we return later today, try to keep refining that learning activity, add a rubric to your learning activity, create additional learning activities for your module, and your choice whether you're doing that in Google Docs, as we've seen some of the teams show, or directly in HydroLearn. And finally, if Jenny does not already have your phone number, please follow that link to that form to submit your phone number.
Jenny, will you also put the link to the form in the chat?
Will do.
All right, so we will be breaking until 5 Eastern, 4 Central, 3 Mountain, 2 Pacific. So by my clock, that's 4 hours in our partner work time. So whatever time it is for you now, in, well, 3 hours and 54 minutes, we'll be back together here. Remember, of course, to take any breaks you need from your team. But as Dan mentioned this morning, please try to come back. If you can't come back, let us know. Any questions before we head out into our groups for work time? All right, Jenny.
Question, sorry.
Oh, go for it.
What's the expectation of completeness for the learning activity by the end of the day? Like, is it just kind of the presentation of the activity, or should there be more functionality to it? Like somebody should be able to do the activity? What do you think?
Yeah, great question. So I think that different teams will take different approaches. Some teams may choose to try to take one learning activity as far as close to completion as possible. And other teams may choose to kind of branch out and do several learning activities, but maybe then none of them will end up to completion. So in some ways, that's up to you. Even if you think your learning activity is complete today, as we continue to work on the constructive alignment and look at things, keep in mind that that'll always be under revision. So that's probably a non-answer, but use your best judgment and try to get as far in a way that makes sense for you and your team.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, and we will share in our content groups this afternoon what you've worked on today, and you could choose to share something you want feedback on. So if you've created multiple learning activities partially, then you may pick one of those that you want more feedback on, or if you've developed one in depth, you might ask for specific feedback on that learning activity. So we will be presenting and sharing those later. All right, Jenny, go ahead and open the room for us. And of course, the co-PIs will hang out here if you have any questions, and then we'll be dropping in on your rooms to see how we can help.
So, Melissa, just for Doug and I,